this should be quite interesting. I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you guys. So
yeah, same here.
Nice. The panel is called Democratizing Design, the Need for Diversity and Access. And so diversity can have many faces in the design world. That being said, it is all connected. To be able to design a good product, you have to be empathetic with the end user. Designing, like you need to be figuring out, what issues are they having, what's cultural kind of like experiences they've had, and like what is it important for them, what is it that they enjoy, what do they even need. And for many years, this has been approached as research. But we are all aware that products are not usually designed for everyone. And research can really just take us this far into really understanding what goes on in someone's world to be able to design a good product for them. So we need diversity, and consequently for bringing diversity into the picture, we need to be able to give design education and access to design to people that usually don't have a place in the design studio, a place at the table, a place in the conversations that happen for bringing products to life. And so this is why we're talking about this topic right now, because here at Gravity Sketch, we believe that democratizing design is the most important part for actually bringing products to life and making sure that we're creating the best products out there, that we're solving problems for people, and that we are enabling everyone to express themselves in a better way. So I would first like to open the mic for Hector, John, and Chereese to introduce themselves first, and then we can just get started with this conversation.
Amazing. Sure. Go ahead, Hector.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Hector Silva. I'm the executive director of the design nonprofit Advanced Design, and our mission is to make design education accessible at whatever means. And I'm also a design professor at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco.
Awesome. Amazing. And I'm Chereese Thornhill. I'm currently the design director of Adidas Seed. Seed stands for School for Experiential Education and Design. I've been in the footwear industry now for around 15 years or so. It's kind of scary to actually say that. But, I'm really passionate about design and also very passionate about education, because I know education has been really the thing that's really opened up my career, and it made all the difference for me. So I'm very passionate about being able to pass that on to the next generation of designers.
And my name is John Mauriello. I'm an industrial designer. I've been focusing on wearables and wearable technology more recently. I'm also an adjunct professor at California College of the Arts. And I also have a YouTube channel called Design Theory, where I basically discuss the principles of great industrial design. It has over 50,000 subscribers, and there are several design resources on there that are available to everyone for free.
Thanks. Yeah, so each one of you is touching design education in a slightly different way, but all three of you are bringing design education to people that normally would not have design education, or bringing light and awareness that design exists to people that would normally would not be aware of design and how it can actually have an impact in the world. And so diversity is a big topic that can be approached from many different angles. In the case of design, how would you approach diversity? How do you think that specific approach is important? We can start with you, Chereese.
Sure. So I think when we think about design, we also have to think about teams and talent. aside from products. And, when I got into the industry, I think I really learned the true value of collaboration. I think when you're in design school, and I had the great, fortune to be able to attend a traditional design school, but there's so much focus put on your individual portfolio. And when I got into the industry, it was all about team. And I think when we think about teams and we think of the makeup of teams, we think about the diversity within a team outside of just the normal race, sex, gender, all of those things. But also when we think about background, also sphere of influence, all of those things are also different points of diversity and influence. And having diversity in those other sets actually finds their way into the products we create. And I truly believe it can create better products by having more diversity in the people who sit at the tables on those design teams. Yeah.
Hector, you can see your mic is on.
Awesome. Great answer, Chereese. I think diversity, it begins with, it should be intertwined in the DNA of every company, of every organization. When you kick it off, there should be a diverse set of individuals who are going to drive that organization forward, because industrial design is a global discipline. You need perspectives from all over the world, not just, a small team where their perspective is a radius of 5 miles. So very important, the difference of if you're going to be manufacturing for the masses on a mass scale, or you're going to be providing services, you need perspective from people who are, a part of different backgrounds, different cultures, and have experienced life, in different ways than you have. So to kind of piggyback on what Chereese said, absolutely chalk it up to teamwork and to mentorship. Sure. I think is a very big part of diversity.
Yeah, it's all, I agree 100%. I think really the ability to thrive as a business is predicated on your ability to adapt. So if you have a diverse pool of perspectives and opinions, you'll just be better suited to adapting to the crazy world that we live in. And to me, that's why diversity is so important, because whether it's design or culture or anything else, the more resources that you have to draw from and the more differing opinions that you have to draw from, the better. I think it's tricky because for better or for worse, differing opinions aren't always valued within an organization. They're trying to protect the tribe, so to speak. There's a lot more friction when there's a differing opinion. So it's a lot easier to be surrounded by yes men in an organization. And it's very tempting for companies to go that route, but that will destroy any business very quickly. I mean, just as an example, think about, I don't know if I should name names, but whatever, we're doing it. So GM, I mean, all those car companies, GM specifically, they leaned on their heritage and kept making cars that nobody really wanted to buy, while overseas manufacturers ate their lunch. And if they had a more diverse perspective and listened to it, of course, I wonder if that could have yielded a better result for the business. And I think it's important to frame it this way, because if you frame it from the perspective of your company's survival, suddenly it becomes a lot more important.
I also think from a product standpoint, you have to keep who you're creating for in focus. Sometimes if you're always out front leading, sometimes that's the space that you've become really comfortable with, you can lose sight of who you're actually creating for. And to your point, John, just try to, we maintain the status quo, right? Oh, we're out front, we're leading, we're always going to be in that space. And if you don't focus on innovating, focus on who you're actually servicing, and have like a servant's mindset of it's about the people, then you can lose your footing. So that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Chereese, you have kind of like a really good story behind it, or kind of like a good perspective. And we've spoken about this in the past, which is, I mean, at Adidas, you realized that you were actually designing for women of color, right? But you didn't actually have women of color. You had very few ones in your teams. So, the fact that you are now kind of like pushing for this to change is really important. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. It's not just the Adidas thing. I think it's really like our entire industry. And I started my career at Nike in the summer of 2007. And if you would believe it, I was only the second African-American female footwear designer in the company's history at that time. And that wasn't that long ago, right? So, and we can look back and think about, some of the other teams that exist in big brands across our industry. And we can look around and we can see that there's a lack of diversity, especially when we talk about gender and race in those spaces. So it's not necessarily a function of a particular brand. It's really just the industry, right? And if we pull back the curtain go to a deeper level, it's our educational system, right? And how do people access these big, large corporations? It's through education, and it's through the same, top 5 design schools across the country. We can name them off. We know which schools those are, right? And if you look at the demographics that exist in those schools, and then you look at where they recruit from. So if you pull the thread, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper into understanding why our design teams look the way they are. So I think we have to look at it as an educational issue. And I think the byproduct of that is just the design teams, the homogenous design teams that we see around. So from a Seed perspective, we exist within Adidas to help shift and change that. And we're a 2-year program right now. We're focused on women of color and creating an alternative pathway into our industry, into the brand, but also the entire footwear industry. And we're teaching by doing. So we're taking products to market in that time frame. And our students are actually learning through this process of creating products for the marketplace with consumers in mind. So we're taking the best of both worlds, the best of a structured college experience and the best of a corporate environment and how you get things done within that. And we're melding them together. But like I said before, I think it's really, we have to look deeper. We can't just look at the surface issue. We have to ask ourselves what's happening underneath and why are we having this result? And then to start to partner on how we create access to our industry, how we educate the next generation of designers, and then just outreach, right? Really, speaking about design on forums like this, and then also creating pathways for people who normally don't get exposed to design to get into the industry.
Yeah, the creating pathways part, I think it's the most important one, because we tend to hear a lot that, we need diversity in design, and we get a lot of examples on how, the fact that teams are not diverse are leading into having products that are not really serving people and so on. But we don't tend to come like this, take those 3 steps back and understand why, like, how can we actually make diversity happen? Right.
Exactly.
And so there's something really important, and there's a conversation happening around, how higher education has to change in general, right? And so design higher education is not any different, right? Do we need to rethink what we, how education, like design education is done? For like, how do we form new designers? How is the internet playing a role in all of this? And how can we actually democratize it? You mentioned these 5 universities that not only the US, the entire world is looking like, to go to. And, we have a world that is connected to the internet, that is getting a lot of information. Do you think there's a play there, as in, how can we enable and democratize and give access to more people that is not necessarily higher education, or higher education needs to change? Hector, we can go with you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. To answer all these questions, yes, it begins with higher education. It begins with organizations, companies, studios. So I think what needs to happen is these studios who are, like right now, I'm based in Chicago. We have amazing studios here. We have studios in the East Coast and the West Coast. The problem is that they're not communicating with their communities. And a lot of students, like myself, was born and raised in Chicago, went to an inner city public school, had no idea what design was until, like everyone, this is a very common story, went to college, went in the wrong major, and ended up in industrial design by luck. And so when we started Advanced Design, we started to invest earlier in K through 8 in high school. That's really where it begins, this communication with younger students, so that they know that this is a pathway to creating objects and services and products, footwear and furniture, etc. So a lot of these companies that we've worked with, a lot of design leaders, a lot of studios have asked me, how do I make my team diverse? And they're situated in downtown New York City or in the Bay Area, whatever. And so my question to them is, are you talking to your neighbors, to the high schools that are around the corner from where your studios are at? And if you're not, that's the problem. You should be investing in those students. Go in there and talk to them about design. And that's how you're going to get students. You're going to give them options, and you're going to inspire them to become these designers. So then the pool of diverse students is going to be greater than the pool that we have now. That's really where it begins. And so the issue is not a lot of people are doing that. Not a lot of big corporations are doing that. And so we have these nonprofits like Advanced Design, like the SEED program and other, IDSA, et cetera, who are doing this. And it's a lot of hard work because you're trying to connect dots, you're trying to disrupt and evolve design education. And design education is, they are really anchored to legacy. It's something that they've done for hundreds of years, probably 100 years, not hundreds. But I don't see them changing anytime soon. I don't see them evolving. Chereese just talked about these 5 schools. And yeah, there's some schools that are definitely, have figured out a formula to succeed and really, but that is only 0.5% of the design schools in the world. And so that's where the problem is that these schools just continue this cycle of recruiting top students, and therefore these companies go to these schools, and so then this is never going to end until that gets disrupted. So that's where I think the opportunity for democratizing design, that's where it's going to happen in our communities.
There's something
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, John. You were going to say something.
I was going to add one quick thing. So, one other thing that's really interesting about education that's been happening more recently is that education has incredible intrinsic value. I mean, learning for its own sake is probably one of the best things that you can do. But I mean, the reality is that student loans are incredibly expensive. So education has sort of shifted from this mind expanding to pursuit to more of like an investment. So if you go to design school, you want to see a return on your investment. Now, if education is centered around getting a job, that's fine. But another thing about these educational institutions is that they struggle to keep up with the rapidly changing requirements of getting a design job. And, they're not equipped to really account for the importance of diversity or a diversity of perspectives. So, just as an example, I can pretty much guarantee you that very few universities are teaching Gravity Sketch, even though it's without a doubt going to be one of the dominant tools in the next couple of years. And another thing is that, and this is a good thing, this is a positive thing, is that, you can find a lot of this stuff online. I mean, even 5 years ago, there were almost no tutorials, no information on how to learn about industrial design, even the technical skills. So it's pretty amazing what has happened over the last couple of years in terms of the accessibility of the information. And I think in a larger scale, I think that a lot of universities might struggle to adapt to this change in the paradigm. I mean, you can take a Keyshot course for $6,000 at a university, or you could find a bunch of YouTube videos for free. Or maybe as a worst case scenario, this is a great scenario, it's not a worst case scenario, you can spend a couple $100 for a Keyshot course online. And, that's not going to teach you the principles of design, but it's certainly an interesting change in the paradigm. The accessibility of information is just absolutely unprecedented. So that's one positive thing that I have to say about all of this. And I think that gives me a lot of hope for the importance of a diversity of culture, perspectives, and opinions. I think that'll be really, really big for the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, John. Like there's so much more access today. I just remember being in college and having to learn about footwear design from, Nike Talk, or, another designer who shared his work in Soul Collector magazine, and I had a magazine subscription. There was no Instagram or YouTube, or Facebook was just starting. So, we had to do a lot of legwork to develop ourselves, or actually collaborate with our teammates, or have mentors within the school to develop. But I do think that there's something special about those days, which allow me to really develop my own point of view on design and have a point of view. Now, I think there's just an oversaturation of information. And I think it's maybe more challenging today for aspiring designers to have their own thought independent of the sea of other thoughts on Instagram. And I think that's what I tell designers today. Who are you as a creative? Do you know who you are? Do you know what's important to you? And how do you communicate that aside from everything else you've seen on IG, So I think that's the duality of like what we're dealing with today.
Yeah, there's like this meme, or like few memes that are like talking about, design decisions. Like design decisions are being made based on what's going to have more success on Instagram.
For sure.
Individuality.
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely this shift in, there's a lot of information out there. It's definitely hard to understand which one to take or which one not to take. But it's opening doors for people that might have not have access before. And now the question is, how are the people actually giving jobs going to be opening to this, right? Because you still need to show, if you have a diploma from one of these 5 universities, or you have a portfolio that is exactly how they want the portfolio to be, then it's likely that you're going to get a job. And it goes back to what Hector was saying, it's this kind of like little machine that it's never going to stop, right? Because even to go into the design universities, like the top ones, you need to like take a course to make a portfolio to go into these universities. So you're already kind of like going into that kind of like pipeline of cookie cutter designers that it's even kind of like crazy, because we are in a creative industry, right? We're meant to be creatives. We're meant to be different. We're meant to be proposing different things. But in a way, they're trying to make us kind of like all be the same. And so so for many, so the linear process, the same tools, some of the tools in the process are not even relevant anymore. That's another thing, right? Like you go to design school. I don't want to kind of like, design school is awesome, like as well. It has like really good things, but like there's some processes that are not relevant anymore, and you still get taught that. And creativity doesn't work in a linear way, right? So how do you think designers or future designers should be guiding themselves into becoming these individuals that they can be by having all the tools that they have right now?
Yeah, I'll just kind of bring up what I said before, and that's what we really focus on with our students within SEED. It's just, what's your uniqueness? And I think a little bit of that responsibility is on hiring managers as well, to be able to identify talent and potential in someone else. But I think the human nature part of us kind of takes over, where we want predictability. We want to be able to predict what this person is going to do and how they're going to create. And so we tend to choose the people we're most comfortable with, where we can predict what they're going to produce, right? And we don't leave space for a different thought or different thought process. And with designers today, I would really stress to develop who you are, what makes you unique, what makes you different, what are you really passionate about, and how do you bring that to your work, and how do you develop that? The portfolios that I see today that are really unique are the ones where people actually know themselves really well. They really have a cause, or they have a way in which they want to impact the world, and that's in everything that they do. So then you can identify, okay, well, this person is really passionate about this. That aligns with where we want to go. This is a great match versus, oh, they render really well, or some of the other things that I think are teachable, but we don't want to teach people anymore. We want to just bring someone in and have them hit the ground running. And we don't look for that uniqueness about the person that is absent maybe in our teams. And we want to bring in someone new. We're just thinking about how do we get the work done? Right. So we bring in someone we know can do the work versus actually looking for uniqueness and being able to teach someone the more technical skills to get to a new place. So.
It's a great answer. And if I can follow up, to go back to the design school is awesome. It is awesome. I've had some of my best times when I was in design school, but no one's asking or no one is proposing, how can this be better? And that's the problem, right? That's the problem that I think we just become complacent. Like, yeah, it's great, but it can be 1,000 times better. But to answer your question, Daniela, I think, and to kind of supplement what Chereese said is within our program with Offsite, we have a class called Professional Self-Presentation, which is a portfolio building class. And it's called Self, the word self is in the title because we definitely spend time. This portfolio should be a reflection of your personality, your character, because like Chereese said, it's very easy to have this cookie cutter template. And if you go to school and you graduate with the 30 students and you have the same projects and you're showing the same work from the same professor, you're going to leave with a very generic portfolio. But if you aren't, able to have the self-awareness of what you want to go into, what you want to do, how what you want to change in design, that might, hold you back a little bit because your portfolio is going to be extremely generic, especially with all the information that exists out there. Like John was saying, you can take YouTube tutorials and now more than ever, this information is accessible. But how do you separate yourself from people, from all the other thousands of designers out there, is by being authentic and extremely unique in the things that you like. And honestly, the answer is there. It's been there since the day that you were born. Years of you, feeding yourself information. You are extremely unique. It's when I tell my students when we're doing this is, it's kind of like the shopping method where you go to the store to shop for very specific items. You don't go to the store, you don't go to Target, and you don't buy everything at Target. You buy very specific things. Well, maybe at Target you do because it's very addicting. But when you go shopping for food, you're very specific in what you need. You don't buy the whole store. And that's in design. You're going to get advice from a bunch of people, you're going to have all these tutorials available, and you have to be very selective in what's going to be applicable to you so that you can succeed. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that one way to sort of combat the generic nature of a lot of design portfolios that you see online on Behance, especially, or Instagram. I think that education could potentially focus on teaching basic design principles first and foremost, because design is essentially just a methodology for solving problems that can be applied to anything. It's very flexible in how it can be applied. So in terms of how you can come up with something new, it's pretty much what Hector and Chereese have been saying. It's just, don't look at the design blogs, at least not at first. Don't look at the design blogs. Look at, nature, or look around your neighborhood, or look at things that you in particular are interested in. I think that's going to yield the best result, because right now the field is pretty competitive. So if you're not really bringing anything new to the table, you better start, because that's the best way to get a job if that's something that you're interested in. So yeah, I agree 100%. It really just comes down to focusing on the basic principles, and then finding inspiration in sources that are exciting to you, not just what get a bunch of clicks on Instagram or whatever else, or YouTube or whatever.
Changing gears a little bit, and one really important thing of diversity. I mean, we talk about diversity, and diversity in some cases it's connected to economical kind of like access, right? And there's this idea that if you go into design, you're not going to make good money. And so if you're coming from a like a background that is looking to, is aspiring to have a better position economically, it's likely that, from your family, from your group of friends, from like even your school, they're pushing you towards medicine or law or engineering. And design is always kind of like, I have a lot of friends that I was lucky that I wasn't in that situation. My parents were always supportive, but I have a lot of friends that had to like really push their parents into letting them go into design, because it's a career that people don't really understand that you can actually make a living out of. So how do we change this? Because it's really ingrained in the society.
I think it's outreach. Just outreach to be able to create more awareness. And I think we can all do a better job. All of us that are in the industry right now, we have been able to be successful. Just extending a hand, like going to your local high school that has an art program, or being able to share more and just create that awareness, and then be a part of creating pipelines. Like I think we all have an ability to just at least give an hour of our time a month at minimum to be able to help affect that change and get the word out and just share more. Going to local high schools, going to parent night or partnering with other organizations that are trying to bring awareness and just sharing our stories. I think that's the easiest, like the most low hanging fruit right now to at least start to get that word out and bring about change.
I think a lot of it is also, telling your parents that what you can create is something that could be meaningful to people's life. Because when you think of industrial design, like I think of consumer electronics, that's like the most obvious thing. But there's so many different avenues that you can create objects that can help with surgeries and other things that can really help anyone and everyone. And for a really long time, my parents didn't know what I was doing. They just thought I was in education. But I used that as a way to start kind of discourse to then eventually tell them that, hey, no, I actually also design objects. Most recently, my parents' home is being upgraded. It's being upgraded to a smart home, and my parents don't even have a smartphone, and they're like in their 60s. And we got them like automatic lights and a smart thermometer and everything like that. And I remember when my mom first walked into her new renovated space, everything she had said in Spanish, of course, she said, this is kind of like, it's working like magic. Like it's so obvious that, that she didn't have to worry about any buttons or anything like that. And so for me, that was all worth it, because then I told her a team, an organization, they spent years doing this. And so I find different opportunities to have these conversations with parents who don't understand that this can be a living, that this can be, you can design something. I truly believe that right now we're still waiting for someone to design something that can, progress humanity 1,000 times. That probably hasn't been invented yet. But if you look at history, the things that have progressed humanity have, they've all been related to a product, an object, a service, so kind of the same thing goes. Outreach, very important. Investing in outreach, suburban, inner cities, all the above. It's extremely crucial. Yeah.
One interesting thing that I think is important to mention is that designers who solve bigger problems will make a lot more money. So if you're I don't know, if you're reskinning toasters, and I'm not trying to say that that's a bad thing. I've reskinned my fair share of products, believe me. That'll get you into a certain sort of income level But let's just say, you're reskinning a toaster or a blender or something, whatever. But if you rethink the way that we eat or prepare food or deal with food or how it's disposed, that's going to be a much more substantial problem. That's going to be much more valuable to people, which is why I was saying before, it's so important to focus on design as a methodology for solving problems rather than, industrial design is I make products and I make them beautiful and functional and all that stuff. That's important. But if you want to make more money, you got to solve bigger problems. I think another thing that we could learn a lot from in terms of developing things further is software culture. So they're quite open in the way that they share their information. You can go on GitHub and find all sorts of code and little programs and things like that. And that's not really utilized in design as much, industrial design specifically, because we're typically working for big companies where IP is extremely valuable, and everything's under NDA. It's sort of not in the culture to share things. So that's another thing that I think is worth talking about. That sort of goes off on a tangent, but yeah, to answer the original question, if you want to make money in design, solve bigger problems, 100%.
And the problems that no one else wants to solve.
Yes, that's another big one.
They're too hard.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Good. All right. I think it would be good to open the conversation to some of the questions in the audience. What do you all think about the role of entrepreneurship in democratizing design, specifically designers of color creating spaces and brands to compete with legacy brands that are slow to change their methods of operation?
I think, and I always say this to a lot of people because I always seem to run into folks that want to have their own footwear brand, right? And I always just say, what are you going to do in the space that's new, right? And to John's point, it shouldn't just be foot coverings, right? We have enough of those. There's a plethora. You can go to Walmart and get a bunch at, substantial less price that does the same thing as your $200 pair of shoes. So if you're starting a new brand, you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a new brand, what are you going to do in the marketplace that's different and unique? Because it's not going to move the needle if it's really just doing an all blue shoe in red this season. What is it really that's new and fresh? Is it a new business model? We can rattle off the brands that have really shifted a dynamic, whether it be their performance or the way the brand approached its business model. Those are the ones that are disruptive. So I would ask from a footwear standpoint or any other, entrepreneur who wants to start something new, think about it in terms of what is the new thing, right? It can't just be, oh, it looks different. Because nothing really does look different. So what does it do that's different and new?
Especially if you're constrained by the anatomy of the foot. It's like,
unless it makes you fly, then. Yeah. That's a great question, though.
And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like understanding, it goes back to understanding that being different is the value that you have, right? And how are you bringing that difference to the table?
It's important to note, I want to make this very clear.
Yeah.
That will not be valued to a lot of people though. So it's really, really hard to know if you're on the right path because, if people, here's the thing, if you're doing something stupid, people will say the same thing as if you were also doing something amazing. So, Einstein, everybody thought he was completely insane. And it was impossible for him to really know. And it's really, really hard to tell if you're doing something crazy and groundbreaking, or if you're just an idiot. So I want to make it clear that it is important to be different, but it's going to take a lot more conviction if you forge a new path. I would highly encourage it. And it does pay off if you're persistent in your vision and you're willing to adapt it in order to, fit the market conditions or whatever you want to call it, or, the conditions of the current paradigm and culture. But it's important to note that if you do anything that is not cookie cutter, it's going to be harder. So it's just, greater risk, greater reward. for me, at least, I don't know if I would consider myself super successful or anything, but it got to a point where it was just like, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to do this. And I don't really care if it doesn't work out or not. I'm making this YouTube channel and we're going to see where it goes. As a worst case scenario, it'll be me just sharing all of my knowledge before I quit design. So that was literally my attitude with it. It was just like, I'm just going to do it. And if it doesn't work out, then that's okay.
But it seems like you had a clear why, right? If only your why is to share all of your knowledge before you quit. Right. And I think a lot of people start things, but they don't have a clear understanding as to why. Maybe they just do it because it's the cool thing to do right now, or a lot of other people are doing it. It looks easy. I want to do it too. But if you're not really clear on your why and why you're the right person to do this and what you're bringing to it that's new, then it's going to be tough. And it's going to be hard to convince other people that it's valuable as well.
Yeah. If you don't believe in what you're doing, I guarantee you nobody else will. So that's very, very important. And it's hard to do because designers are very self-reflective, they're empathetic, and those things are not necessarily compatible with starting your own venture. There are other things. They're really excellent at divergent thinking. They're really, really good at solving problems that don't have a clear answer. But in terms of just having the fortitude to move forward, I think that because designers are criticized throughout their entire education ruthlessly, it can be really, really hard to have the confidence to move forward.
Good. I work at a university and I see a common thread is not just job duties, but also an issue in the way they formulate degrees. They assume people can only be good at one thing, either by their title or degree choice, where people can have multitude of skills that get overlooked because of those labels. A comment, but if you want to say something.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, and I went to a traditional university and I really faced a lot of the things that Hector said. I was in a class with 30 other students and we were working on a Disney exhibit. Right? Very pointed project. So at the end, if I worked on it and I have my other 20 or 30 classmates who did the same project, what makes me different than they are, and who's going to get hired if we've done the same project? And I think it's really important that students feel empowered. I think when you go to university or you're used to going to traditional school, you're used to just checking boxes. Oh, what's on my schedule? I got to go to this class, and that class, and then I'm managing my grades. I don't think students are being taught to think of the big picture and how to leverage their education to help them get to where they want to be versus just looking for someone to tell you, oh, you've got an A, this is where you should go. And I think we have to empower those students to understand why they're taking the classes and how it's helping them and where do they want to go. And that's how you're able to leverage your education, because it ladders up to this bigger picture. And then you can communicate who you are as a designer versus just saying, hey, here's my paper, hire me. But we don't know who you are and you don't know who you are and you can't even communicate who you are to us. Why should we hire you? And I think it's a shift that has to happen at the university level. And I think that's why it's important that students have mentors outside of their university and mentors in the industry to help them understand how to get the most out of their education at a university.
I think that's a fantastic answer. And I think the design educator of today, that person has one of the most difficult jobs in the world, because they are responsible for molding the future designer. And, I've been a student where the educator is like, okay, today we are going to redesign a toaster or whatever. And then you get the same results, right? So it's a very assembly line. So when I went into education, the kind of thinking, behind some of these projects where the school and the department, was telling me, okay, you're going to be teaching this class, therefore here are the 4 projects you'll be teaching. So instead of me kind of giving them this template of this with assembly line results, you rethink the formula and you have students think about the experience, because then the solution can go anywhere. And then you have very unique solutions when you start to think about an experience versus, a very specific, toaster that's going to look like everyone else's toaster. So, if you're a design educator, you need, your job is not only to, understand what the student needs to do and how they need to succeed and how to utilize their best skills, because every student is different. Also, every student learns very different. There's a lot of great educators out there fighting the good fight. And there's also a lot of educators who are just kind of not doing that, I guess. If you're a student, your job, like Chereese said, is to get resources from outside your school as well, not just your school. That's just one source. And so your design education should be equivalent to like co-parenting. You're being taught by your school. You're also being taught by outside sources like your mentors, a friend who know designers and YouTube. And so there, that's kind of how you should be framing what design education should be. It should be co-parenting. That's how someone's going to succeed, both from an educator's perspective, but also as a student. And as an educator myself, like we have fall semester and spring semester. When I'm not working, like let's say winter break or summer break or spring break or fall break, I am touring the country. I'm going to different cities, meeting with different studios and different design leaders so that I myself could continuously evolve as an educator, so that I understand what is happening at the forefront of design education. I could bring that to my classroom. So yes, I'm a design educator, but you're also a student. Actually, next week I'll be in New York, and I'll actually be seeing Chereese and among other studios, because I feel like that is my purpose as an educator, is to continuously teach myself things that I don't know and not assume that I know everything. And that's a very toxic trait to tell your students that, hey, I'm here to, I know everything, right? And that's very dangerous. But
yeah, that goes back to my first point, collaboration. Like we should never stop. No matter where we are, we should always be extending ourselves and connecting the dots and learning from each other. It's really important.
That kind of goes back to our topic, right? Like democratizing design and bringing diversity, because we, like all of you have touched on the idea that, or on the fact that design is not a solo activity. Design is not just done by designers, and design is not done with a cookie cutter method or process, which means that, there are people that are likely going to have a good input, a good impact in a design process, in a product that is being created, and in an experience, as Hector was saying, that are not necessarily designers per se, or they don't consider themselves as designers. So there's this element of how are we bringing communication and collaboration and conversations to different types of people, and how are we actually making that happen? Because right now it still feels very fragmented, right? It's still kind of like, you're in this part of the process, you shouldn't touch my part of the process.
Just change your title. That's it.
Yeah, I was gonna
just don't. Yeah, that's it. That's all you have to do. Just change your title on LinkedIn. Done.
For sure. Creative. Yeah, I think we can get boxed in often. And I think we talk about product creation, and we can talk about the million roles that exist within product creation teams. I think we have to break those barriers down. I know as designers, we can become very protective of our process and don't touch that part. That's my part of the process. And we just kind of ship it off to development afterwards. But I think you'd find that if we stretch ourselves into the other disciplines, we'll be better designers. If we invite the other disciplines into our space and we see each other as equals with equal value to bring, I think we'd get to better results at the end. for sure.
I also think, to add to that, is I think the reason why sometimes we might be so guarded, or we're guarding this specifically, is most likely because you're stagnating and you're not evolving. So then you're holding on to this thing that you think makes you unique, and it really doesn't. And I've seen that. I've experienced that personally when I've worked with other colleagues at other universities. And, I take this approach, this very like Elon Musk approach, like, here are my patents. I welcome you to add to this conversation, and I'm here to learn as well. And if you're not consistently evolving, educating yourself, then your content and what you're teaching won't evolve either, right? So you're only as good as what the knowledge that you're teaching. That's essentially, and that's why I think that a lot of older educators are kind of stuck in this. They have a thesis, or they have a hypothesis, and they have this way of design thinking, and you're just like, that's cool, but I've seen that 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Like, after you teach it the first semester, things start to get outdated, because design moves and evolves really fast, right? So
we have one question from the audience. How can we stimulate more age diversity in design education, specifically in the field of digital transformation? Gravity Sketch, for instance, is a great tool to teach other older designers 3D, since it's so intuitive. How can we make sure all generations are included? What will be the role of senior designers, who will probably not be the people rendering shoes all day because of cost reasons, but will need to have an understanding of 3D design?
Yeah, I think it's a mindset shift. And I've heard that too. I remember, starting off my career, and we were all just kind of transitioning into, it was MindCAD, like a digital, like footwear 3D program. And some of them were senior designers, who only wanted to do Illustrator, were just very adamant that they're not moving into shoemaker and designing their shoes, in 3D. And I think it goes back to Hector's point about just not being stagnant. It goes back to just keeping an open mind, always learning, making like your life about learning, and just being curious, and then asking the question, how can, 3D design or Gravity Sketch make me a better designer? Right. And always just being able to look at our own process and never feeling like we've arrived, but we can just continue to grow and change and evolve. I think it's just that mindset. And then from a structure standpoint, or from a corporate standpoint, I know that there's this idea of, hey, we want the new, fresh, young designers. And I think it's just everyone's individual responsibility that you remain youthful, that you don't allow yourself to get stuck in the mud or not want to evolve or change, and have a youthful mindset, which is just really curiosity and an ability to adapt to change, no matter how old you are.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I mean, if we just look at Scott Robertson, he does not need to learn Gravity Sketch. He doesn't. He could keep drawing awesome cars in 2D until the day he dies. But, he decided that he wanted to adapt. So you can certainly do it too. You don't have to. I mean, the value as a senior designer is more in your expertise and sort of the 10,000-foot view of the product development process. And it's not quite as much in the execution, at least not always. But I mean, if you want to learn any of this stuff, there's no reason why you can't. I mean, there's no reason why not.
Definitely. Cool. All right. Well, we're getting to the end of our panel. This has been really insightful, really good conversation. Lots of claps and praise in the chat. A comment. I've seen resistance to new tools for most of my career. Only I mostly perceive this as a fear because for those who place a lot of their self-worth into their expertise with a particular tool, moving to a different tool puts that perception at risk. Definitely, it's what Hector was talking about. Cool.
Adapt. adapt or die. That's it.
For sure.
Like, that's it.
I was asking because I teach professionals GS. People want to learn, but might need a different approach. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something really important. And I think Mauricio was touching it yesterday on his talk. And he was saying that right now, the way, like what we perceive as intuitive, it might not be intuitive for an older generation. It was exactly that example because, we're training our brain to think in that way, but previous generations had other products, had other ways of understanding the world. And in that case, it's not as intuitive. So yeah, you need to kind of like adapt in some way to attract different people and to make people kind of like understand what you're talking about and try to teach them.
Yeah. I also think ultimately it's just, do you have a desire to learn it or not? It's like really that simple. I think sometimes we want to make learning complex and like overcomplicated because maybe ultimately we don't want to take the time and the 10,000 hours it takes to become a master at something. And, I think ultimately you just have to immerse yourself. Right? Like that's the only way we learn something new. Immerse ourselves in doing the activity, surround ourselves with other people who also want to learn. So we're not just doing it by ourselves, but we have a community of people all working together to get better. That's great motivation too. So if you're off by yourself trying to learn, connect yourself with other people who are learning too, right? Because they may have a different approach that could also help you in your path to learning. So I just feel like, sometimes we make a lot of excuses as to why we can't do things, but ultimately, if we have the desire to do it, it can be done.
Well said.
Yeah.
And well, I just want to end with, first, thank you, the three of you, for being in the panel. It has been great. It has been great. And also, kind of like thanking you for the work that you are doing. There's something really important about bringing diversity and democratizing design, which is bringing more people that are different into the picture, into places that are actually seen by other designers, but by other aspiring designers. It's really hard to find role models that are not looking the same as how we have been seeing role models for many years. And the three of you are really making a good job in terms of like putting yourself out there and pushing for diversity to actually happen. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
For being here. All right. So, awesome indeed. And how can we get in contact with them? They are all listed in our Instagram channel, but we'll put their Instagram accounts here for you guys to kind of like reach out to them.
Yeah, LinkedIn as well.
Thanks,
LinkedIn.
Chereese.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Hector. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.